Hello guys, welcome back to another episode here on African Confessions. So I'm going to share with you this other message that I just received on my messenger. The message reads like this: hello my brother, can you please post for me as anonymous? My story did not happen in South Africa, but it happened whilst I was still back home. At that time I was a little bit younger than I am right now. When I came here to South Africa, I think I was somewhere around 26. Then what happened when I arrived here, I was staying with this other brother of mine, but he's not my brother as such. It is only that I come from the same country that he comes from. But what I don't understand, I don't know if this guy was involved or maybe it was just bad luck for him, because the night before we had gone to bed, so I left him watching TV, then I just slept because we only had one room. So whilst he was watching TV, I just woke up and I heard him speaking on the phone, but the way that he was talking on the phone, it was as if he was arranging a funeral. So I was sleepy at that time. I didn't even ask who had died. So in the culture from where I come from, if you sleep in the same room with an older person, when you wake up in the morning, you as a younger person, you are supposed to say good morning. So I said good morning to him and he did not reply. So I just thought maybe he was in a very bad mood. Then I bathed, then I prepared the food that I was going to carry with to work. I'm connecting this story because after I had left where we were staying, there was something that happened to me that I think that this guy that I was staying with, maybe he wanted me to be kidnapped. I truly don't understand, because what happened is that the place where I was working, because I was working at this company that fixes big trucks and the stuff, so I had to wake up early in the morning, sometimes I think around 3 a.m, catch a taxi so that I can be at the train station on time. Later on, I suspected that this guy, he had changed the time on my phone, because what happened is that after I was chased with those two guys who had a coffin in their car, I then asked this other security guard what time it was. Then he told me that it was 3 a.m, but when I had checked the phone when I was going out of the house, the time on my phone was telling me that it was 3:30 a.m. in the morning. But when I was chased by those guys who had a coffin in their car, so when I left the house from where I was staying and I went into the street, I was surprised that the whole location was quiet. It was too quiet for a Monday. Then I thought maybe something was happening. But what amazed me is that I met these other two guys. They were drunk and they were throwing beer bottles at each other. We didn't speak or anything. They were just going on their way because they were too drunk. So the other thing is that I didn't hear any taxi. There was no taxi at all. So when I checked the time on my phone, it was now telling me that the time was now 4 a.m. Now I was thinking that the train, it leaves the train station at 5 a.m. So I started to run towards the main road. What was on my mind now, I was thinking that if I will catch a bus that was going into town, then I will walk to the train station. Whilst I was running to the main road, then this my brother that I was telling you about, he just called me out of nowhere. Then he asked me, where are you right now? Then I told him that I cannot find any taxi, and now I'm checking my watch. I don't think that I'm going to get to the train station in time. And I asked him, is there a taxi strike or something, because I cannot find any taxi. Then he said he didn't know. Then I told him, so let me go to the main road, maybe if I catch a bus I'll be on time. He just said, be careful of the Nyaupe boys, and he dropped the call. When he told me about the Nyaupe boys, I then picked up a half a brick. On the other hand, I had a half a brick. On the other hand, I had a bag in which there was my food and also my work suit. Then I started to run towards the main road. But when I was at the main road waiting for the bus, what amazed me is that even though my phone was telling me that it was almost 4:30, it was still so dark and there was no movement at all. So this main road is like a T junction. The other one, it goes into the highway, then the other one, it goes back into the location. So there always in the morning, there are people who come there. They'll be selling tea and magwinya, sweets and cigarettes, but there were no people at all at that time. And I was wondering, why am I not seeing any buses? Because there were a lot of buses that take people from the location and the surrounding areas going with them into town. Whilst I was wondering, then I saw this car. This car, it's like a Chrysler, the one that looks like a small taxi. Then it had a small trailer at the back, because that small trailer, you can see what is inside of that trailer because it has glasses on both sides. Then I saw that there was a coffin inside that car. It was a white coffin because the street lights were on. The car then passed me. When it passed me, it hit the brakes. Then it stood there right there in the middle of the road, I think for 1 minute or so. Then it started to reverse. The way it was reversing so fast that they jackknifed the trailer. Then they got out of the car. Then they started to fix the trailer. As they were working on the trailer, I could hear that one of the guys sounded as if he was a black guy. Then the other guy who was sounding angry, it seemed as if it was a white guy. So then they unhooked the trailer, then pushed it on the side of the road. So these guys then turned around their car. Then they turned on their hunting flashlights. Now what they did is that they will turn on and off those hunting flashlights. So this caused me to be dizzy because I had been standing in the dark for quite a long time. So when they will turn on their lights, I could see a white light. When they will turn them off, I'll just see nothing, just blackness. So I tried to run. When I tried to run, then I fell into this flood drain because there is this big flood drain. When I fell into the drainage, I just broke my leg because there was no water in the drainage. So I landed with my feet on the concrete floor. I just had my bones snapping on my left leg. Then I just fell to the ground. Whilst I was in pain, I heard that there was a car that stopped right there where I was, and two guys came out of the car. So these guys, whilst they were talking, the way that I understood them at that time is that they were discussing and trying to find a way whereby one of them will climb down, then bring me up. Whilst they were talking, I heard the white guy say, "Ish, the police, throw away your flashlight." So when that car stopped, I immediately knew that it was a police van. I wanted to shout for help when I heard that it was a police van, but ever since I had come to South Africa, I was afraid of the police, and now I was afraid of this funeral car. So I just crawled into a corner the time when the police tried to help them with their own flashlights. So I just crawled myself into a corner until those guys had left. I stayed in that flood drainage until the sun had come out. Then I started to call for help. I knew that there was always taxi marshals at that T-junction because they always try to stop people from hiking private cars. They want them to get into the taxis. So when I started to call for help, one of the taxi marshal came and he looked down and he said, "Hey, what are you doing down there?" But lucky enough, they pulled me out of that flood drain. Then they stopped one taxi that was going to town. Then they just put me there. Then they told the taxi driver to drop me off at the hospital. Then when we arrived at the hospital, he just told the security that they had found me and I had a broken leg. Then they put me on the stretcher. In that hospital, I stayed, I think, for 3 months or so. But what happened is that this brother of mine that I was telling you about, I knew his number by head. So I asked one of the patients who had a phone, because my phone, I never found it. Maybe someone had picked it up. So I dialed his number and I told him that I was at this hospital. Can you please come and see me? But what surprised me is that from that day up until today, he never spoke with me. He never did anything. He never came to see me or anything. Then I contacted the guy that I was working for. I told him that I was in hospital. That was the guy who came and he saw me until I had recovered. After I had recovered, I had nowhere to stay because when the hospital discharged me, I just stood at the gate because there was nowhere where I could go. So I just called my boss. Then he told me that he was going to come and pick me up. So he came and he picked me up. Then I started to stay at his farm. So my brother, this thing of me being chased by people with coffins, it did not start in South Africa. Even whilst I was still back home, this thing once happened because I was working for this other guy. He was a big businessman. So what he did is that he would fix trucks and also buses and also cars. I also learned panel beating from him. After I had dropped out of school, then my father approached this guy and asked him if I could come and work on his garage. I'll be working whilst I am learning but not getting paid. I'll be paying with my labor. I worked for so many years without getting any pay. I think I started to work for this guy when I was still 17 years old, up until somewhere I was 21 years old without getting any pay. So what I'll do is that when I was able to fix cars, what I'll do is that because I was sleeping in one of the cars at the garage, there was no house for me to sleep. I was just sleeping in the car. So what I'll do is that someone maybe will just have a breakdown in the middle of the night. Then I'll just walk towards their car and I'll tell them that I am a mechanic, I can fix their car. Sometimes I'll fix that car, then sometimes maybe the job will be just too much to be fixed on one night. Then in the morning I'll tell them to come to the garage, but when they came to the garage I'll tell them that you should not tell my boss that you know me or anything, but if it is a best tire, that one I knew that I could just fix it right there in the middle of the night, then get something. So all of this money that I was getting from these piece jobs, I was just putting them aside. Then I ended up going for a trade test, then I got my certificate, but it was not easy. It was really hard because this guy, sometimes I could even fix cars without eating anything, fixing a car until you feel dizzy from hunger. Back home, whilst I was working for this guy, I saw many things at night because I was staying alone at the garage. So sometimes what I'll do is that maybe I'll just get out of the car just to get a smoke because I am a smoker. So whilst I'll be outside, sometimes I'll just see something like a baboon. That baboon will just enter the premises, and if you try to see where that baboon went, you will never find it. Sometimes when I'm outside, maybe I have gone out to buy some cigarettes. On my way back, when I'm in the premises, there was this old Toyota Cressida. It was quite an old car. It wasn't working anymore. It was just sitting there at the garage. But many nights I could look at that Toyota Cressida. Then I'll see that it is as if there was a woman in that car and a man. So the other day I tried to go and see what was going on. But when I approached that car, those two people, they just disappeared. Then early in the morning, this guy that I was working for, he was so angry at me. That is when these problems of me being chased by people carrying coffins started. It was that night when I approached that Toyota Cressida at night, when I saw that there were two people in that car, then those people just disappeared. So I don't know if I was cursed by God or maybe I just have bad luck, because from the start what happened is that I had just started drinking beer, but I remember that on that night I wasn't that drunk. So I was walking back to the garage. Then this car stopped. It was a white Toyota Hilux, a double cab. Then it stopped. Then the guy just asked me, where are you going? But there were two people in the car. Then I told them that I'm going to that garage right there. Then they told me, it's late, get into the car, we'll drop you, we know that guy you work for. So I got into the car. When I got into the car, I heard that the door had been locked from the driver's side. So when we drove past the garage where I was staying, I tried to tell them that this is where I stay, you can drop me off, but then they refused. I tried to open the door whilst the car was moving, but the car, it seemed as if you have locked from the driver's side, no one else can open the doors. So the driver just drove fast. Then he turned and he drove a little bit into the gravel, and we entered this forest and he parked. Then they said, you must get out of the car. So all of us, the three of us, we got out of the car. The other one, he was holding a wheel spanner. Then they said, let's go at the back. So at the back, then there was a woman who was lying there. Me, I just thought maybe it was just someone who was with them. Then they told me that, and have sex with that woman. If you refuse, we're going to bury you alive. So I looked at the other guy who was holding the wheel spanner and the location where we were. I didn't even know exactly where we were. So I got into that car and I just told myself that this woman, I don't even know her. So I'm going to save myself by having sex with her. When I touched that woman, she was cold as ice, just like when you take out meat out of the deep fridge. She was so cold. Then I realized that this woman was a dead woman. I looked back and I told them that you cannot expect me to have sex with a dead woman. So whilst I was trying to explain myself, one of the guys, he grabbed my leg, then he pulled me from the back of the pickup. So I fell on the ground with my face first. Then he started to kick me in the ribs. It was so painful because this guy, he was wearing a safety shoe. It was really hitting me so hard. So I rose up and I went back into the back of the pickup. Then I started to touch that woman, but it was not a nice thing at all. Even now that I'm writing my story, I can actually see as if that thing is happening over and over again, because when I looked at her face, this woman, it seemed as if she had died with her mouth wide open. Also, her eyes were wide open. I can never erase her face from my mind, no matter how hard I try. This even affects me each and every day. No matter how hard I try to pray about it. This thing just affects me emotionally. So my brother, this is my own story. So what they did is that one of the guy who was holding a wheel spanner, he took out something that looked like a white handkerchief. Then he climbed into the car. Then he opened that woman's legs. Then he wiped between her legs. Then he came out. Then he came towards me. Then he wiped my penis because there were some fluids that were on my penis. Then he wiped them off. Then they just got into the car. Then they drove. Up until today, my brother, ever since I came here to South Africa, even to get into a relationship, it is a struggle for me. So now, my brother, the thing that I'm facing is that whenever I see a white double cab Toyota Hilux, I just keep on thinking about what happened at the back of that car. I avoid that car at all cost. Even when I'm in town, if I have to park next to that car, I make sure that I find another parking space because I just feel sad about what happened to me, and it is a thing that I cannot just come out into the open and tell someone that this is what happened to me. This is my own secret, my brother. Dear listeners, that was a story right there from one of our brothers. He did send me a message. Such a sad story, such a sad story. Let's meet again in the following episodes.